Welcome back to another episode of the Untethering Shame podcast. I'm your host, Kyira Wackett, and today we're diving deep into the transformative potential of shame. Not as a force to silence or hide from, but as a teacher, guiding us back to ourselves. Joining me is Elizabeth Kipp, a stress management and historical trauma specialist whose work blends trauma-informed recovery coaching, ancestral clearing, and yoga-based healing. After navigating over 40 years of chronic pain, anxiety, and addiction, Elizabeth now dedicates her life to helping others reclaim their innate healing power. Now, in our conversation, which some of you are going to be going, wait, is this the first time that we're hearing her? Because her name sounds familiar. Now, this is our second conversation, and in the show notes, you're going to find a link to our first episode, so make sure you check that out. But today, Elizabeth comes back, and we're exploring the profound link between shame and addiction, the resistance we often feel in healing, and how practices like breathwork and inner child work can reconnect us to our truth. Elizabeth offers a powerful lens on how ancestral trauma shapes our emotional responses and reminds us that turning towards shame, rather than away from it, can be a gateway to freedom, radical acceptance, and resilience. Now, before we dive in, I do want to let you know about a new segment on the podcast called Ask Me Anything. Every Monday, I'm answering your real, unfiltered questions about shame, boundaries, burnout, identity, relationships, all of it. You can submit your question anonymously or with your name, whatever feels safest for you, and nothing is off limits. Well, almost nothing. The link to submit it is in the show notes, so let me know what's on your mind, and you might get featured on an upcoming segment. All right, let's dive in. Welcome back, Elizabeth. I'm so excited that you're here.
Oh, thanks, Kyira. I'm thrilled to be back.
I know after our first recording, I was like, I don't think we've had enough time together yet, which obviously can extend outside of a podcast and we can have a friendship outside of that. But I was so excited just thinking about this next level of a conversation that we were going to have and sort of spitballing back and forth, thinking about where we want to go. One of the things that I think comes up for, I don't want to say every client, I would bet the majority, if not close to the entirety of clients that I work with, is the struggle with seeing their shame from a place of curiosity and compassion. Oftentimes, I feel like when we have anything where we are reacting, we're in that state of defense, we're performing, as soon as it gets connected to shame, it just feels like we feel shame about our shame, and then we feel shame about that shame, and we're just in a spiral that stops us from being able to move forward in a way that is helpful or meaningful in any way for us or for the relationships that we have. And so tell me a little bit about why this feels so important to you and the work that you do too.
Well, as an addiction recovery coach, shame is the food of addiction. I'm always looking in the recovery space to where is relapse an issue? What are the things that bring relapse in? Because there's like an 80% relapse rate in the first year. Mm-hmm. I was in a recovery coaching program within the first year of my own recovery, and I'm 11 years in recovery now from a long time of being on prescription pain and anti-anxiety medication, which that numbs the body, but it also numbs the emotions, and it kind of numbs the whole situation.
Subdues,
right?
Yeah.
Numbs our joy, it numbs everything. So when I detoxed and got clean, all my emotions just like, there they were. and I was like, well, now what?
Yeah.
Thank God I was at a pain management program that kind of gave me some tools that I went right into working with Tommy Rosen, who's the founder of Recovery 2.0. And he brings in a morning practice that we do that. And he brought in a coaching program. He's been doing coaching programs for a while, but I was in this first one. And you know, he'd take us through lessons and this and that. And we always had what he called love missions. One of the love missions he gave us was to wherever there's shame in our life to shine a light on it. Well, let me tell you something. I was like, Tommy, give me another assignment. I'm not doing that one. Like, I'm out. I'm so not ready for that. You know, and I noticed that I had that reaction. And what I did was I did what you just said. I got real curious.
Yeah.
And I understood that my nervous system at that point, because I was so still activated and still unwinding from all those years of chronic pain. And then the switch in the nervous system of like going from completely, quite numbed out to all of a sudden like not. And so that's a lot of instability. So I was still trying to get my sea legs. And I kind of had an inherent understanding of how much I could handle at once. So what I did with that question, that love mission, was I put a pin in it. Mm-hmm. And I said, I can't deal with this right now, but I'm going to put a pin in it and I'm going to get back to it when I can. And so 9 months later, I'm sitting in my morning meditation, which is a regular practice for me. And there it was. The pin came out, and the thing that had freaked me out that I couldn't really access or felt like it was too much at that point, there it was. It surprised me. But it was me at about 4 years old. My parents, kind of by the time I could walk, they put me into service. Women are supposed to serve. Mm. So the scene, the shame piece was one of my parents had asked me to fix them a drink, which was, by the way, an alcoholic drink. So mm-hmm. I had to go to the bar and I had to get the ice and use a whacker to bang on the ice to crush it. And I could feel the pain in this memory. I actually remembered the pain in my hand and the cold and the whacking and the pain I felt, which was kind of interesting. But what was more interesting to me was the shame I felt underneath it. And like, what is that? And it was, I'm not doing this fast enough. So right at the age of 4, when I'm really being put into service for my parents and kind of the world generally, I'm already saying I'm not enough.
Yeah.
I'm deciding I'm not enough and that's bad.
Which was probably told to you by them at some point and reinforced. I'm assuming you didn't pick that thought up on your own entirely.
I don't think that was just something I made up. Here I'm like 59 years old and I'm reminiscing about this 4-year-old part of me who really was kind of stuck in my nervous system. And it was so beautiful to see that younger part of me and empathize and give her a hug and tell her it was okay and to kind of provide some safety, steadiness, because I was in meditation, I was using the breath, steadiness and groundedness so that the body could then just process the stuck energy in the body around that. That to me was like, wow, look what happens when we actually turn into our shame instead of hide from it. Look at what happens. We free ourselves.
Do you think that it was, because I have moments that I can go back to when I was young. And I know I still have, it's an iterative process, the inner child healing. And I've done some work around it, but I know there's definitely more for me to do. It's more acceptable, or maybe I'm more willing to do the work or be curious when there's so much time removed. I have a really hard time doing it in the present. And so I think about like something that would have happened. Like I carry some shame over an interaction yesterday. Every single time that I have to be a parent and I can't be a friend, which that is my commitment. I am not her friend. I am her parent. And when there are moments where hard conversations have to happen, I've worked really hard at my reactivity because that would always really charge me up, particularly if she wasn't listening to me, because I'd go back to that inner child self of feeling like my mom or my grandma didn't listen to me, and I would start to react. So I've been able to like kind of process some of that shame. But when I go back to, okay, well, yesterday, I still don't know if I handled it the right way. I still don't know if I was a good mom. I feel like I didn't handle it enough. Did I give her everything that she needs? I have a much harder time being curious about that. It's almost like it's too connected to the me now. Like I can't go there without judgment in the same way. Why is that, do you think?
Well, you're talking to somebody who does ancestral clearing.
You're like, we're going deep.
I study historical trauma. So what we say, I love the way you put that, because there's an expression, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if I'm getting dysregulated, I love that you use that term, and we're just getting so activated and the story in the mind is starting to spin, and we're asking all these questions, making all these judgments, like you said. That points to something in the past. Now, often it's in our past, but it also is vibrating with something can be, vibrating at the same frequency of something in our mother's past or our mother's past. And think about this, when we're, when our grandmother is 4 months pregnant with our mother, the eggs that are going to be us begin to develop in our mother. So now we're sharing energetic space with our mother and our grandmother for 5 months. And so now we're subject to the energetic things that they're going through and the biochemistry that creates. We're swimming in that. And our grandmother was in her grandmother for 5 months. And so now we've got a line all the way down. Our job here is if we can get conscious enough, then we can break the cycle wherever it started, but definitely when it's reactive like that, that's in the past. I want to ask this question because it's very helpful for me. When is it going to be enough? Because you're like, did I do enough for my daughter?
Right.
And so the question is, when is my effort going to be enough? Like, when can I make peace that I'm trying the best I can and that's okay? Like, whatever that is, my enoughness in this moment, when is that going to be okay?
Yeah.
Because if we're still going, no, it's not enough, what's going on with the shame under there?
Right. Which is such an interesting thing because I think, one of the things, having worked for so many years in eating disorder recovery, a lot of the conversation was around the standards and the chase that you're getting to within your eating disorder. I have to be this much weight, or I can only eat this many calories, or whatever it is. The needle always moves. There's never an enough point. That's the toxicity of it. And so I think, what you're calling out is really that shame is a moving target that is going to make you constantly feel like you're not enough, no matter how many mountains you climb. And so the interesting thing, I think, is it sounds like, when we talked even this notion of like, what can shame teach us? What's the gift when we experience shame? It is the idea that when I am feeling that, there is something underneath that I'm afraid of, that I am worried about, that I haven't healed, probably connections to my own relationship with my mom, where I'm still waiting for her to show up. And maybe I'm projecting onto me that then I have to be that version. Like, there's so many places it could be. But I don't often get curious enough to ask the question. I just sort of stop at, why I fucked up is essentially the theme. I fucked up. I didn't do enough. I can't even tell you that that's why I didn't do enough in the moment. I think no matter what I did, I would still feel like it wasn't enough. And I think the part of it is, when things are hard, my storyline is it's probably because I caused it. So when we had a hard moment last night, it couldn't be that she's 4. It couldn't be that she's learning and she's tired and she's moving through some developmental leap. It had to be, I caused it, therefore I fucked up. And there's nothing I can do to make up for the fact that somehow I made this happen.
That's quite a sentence that you bring into yourself. I think I'm going to come in from this direction.
Yeah.
It feels to me like we get in a stress pattern, and this is the nervous system gets used to, this is how we do life. And we really already have a slight negative bias anyway in the world as we move through the world. If there's something new, our first thing is no. And that's a way that we keep safe. Like the whole species keeps safe that way, right? If no, and then we decide, right? But in this society, there's eating disorder. Like, you would not see an eating disorder in a balanced, communally focused, tribal society. I feel like it's a symptom, because I work in food addiction as well. Again, when is enough going to be enough is a very powerful question. Yeah. And for me, what I notice is I've always got to the stress pattern, the way it exerts itself is like there's always got to be something that's not okay. You're using the thing that happened with your daughter as an example to get back in that stress pattern. That's the way the nervous system knows, because we've programmed it. This is how we do life.
Is it that something needs to be wrong? Like, I am wrong, I'm not doing something, or just there needs to be something wrong in my life, or both? Yeah,
just something wrong. Just something that's not
something chaotic.
Whether we point it at someone else or ourselves, it's just not, things are not okay. And so that is a very interesting pattern to me. And I see it all the time. I work on it myself, but I see it in my clients. I see it in people in recovery. And the question again is, when is enough going to be enough? Right? When is it going to be enough? And that will stop people in their tracks, and it brings them to a little higher consciousness. And then I'm, from my point of view, I'm like, well, what tool do I need to bring to switch off that pattern? Because now I see I'm back in that pattern again.
Yep.
And so that's the nervous system that doesn't feel that it's safe. You mentioned yourself, you got in that situation and you got activated, and I get activated myself about the stuff that happened. I just had something that happened 2 days ago. I was like, oh my God, here I am. I've got to pull my tools out, right? So it's like doing long, deep breathing and just being present with whatever is coming up and allowing it and befriending it instead of trying to push it away and calling ourselves bad because we have it, whatever it is a way to actually retrain the nervous system and the brain into a new way of living. Oh, I'm going to pause and breathe. I'm not going to feed my neuroses.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and feed my serenity.
Well, and one of the things I paid attention to, because my mom very much struggles with deep shame wounds that I think probably I imagine her being similar to how you felt in that room, where it's like, I'm not going there. I can't go there. And I've learned in my own journey of healing that I think in many ways for her, it is that she can't at this time go there. And so learning to make peace with that. But one of the things that I struggle with is for her, because of her shame, so much is then required from an external standpoint for validation to make her feel okay. And so I would notice with me always growing up, it was this constant, beating a dead horse of like over and over again, I'm so sorry I did this. Are you okay? Are you mad at me? For days on end. Or if it was something good, like, don't you like this? Do you like this thing that I got you? And so I'm aware when it happens with my daughter, my first inclination is to go to her to repair it. So the one thing I have started to do is when I have those feelings, there are moments like if we've had an experience, the conversation, if anyone else is watching this, would be like, that seemed very healthy. Like I can tell you logically, I'm able to handle this in a very healthy and balanced way. My voice is able to stay regulated. I am always centering on the behavior, not her as a person. Like I'm doing all the things that as a therapist, I would teach someone to do. But shame doesn't really give a shit that I'm doing it that way. It's just, like you said, it's got a pattern. I fucked up. I'm the problem. And so what I have been able to do is to not then chase her for validation that we're okay, which has been a really cool breaking and retraining of my brain. So I have to sit with the feeling. It's not her job then to make me okay, because that would keep me stuck in that cycle. So I have to sit there. What I'd like to do is get to the place where then I don't spend 3 or 4 hours ruminating on it. And it sounds like maybe the next step that you're calling out is asking that question and maybe forcing my shame to explain what would enough have looked like. Because I don't think my shame has an answer. I think it would be like, well, no, nothing would be enough. And then that kind of helps you go, then I'm going to release this and you don't get 3 more hours of my time. Because it's not in service of me and being the type of mom I want to be. It's in service of you, shame, making me constantly be addicted to the chase of enough.
So think about law of physics. It says an object in motion stays in motion unless acted on by an equal or opposite force. And think about a stress pattern in that way.
Yeah. Okay.
It's going to stay in place unless because it's got no momentum. And it's got force. In order to change that, we need to come at it with an equal or opposite force to shift it. And so I asked myself, well, what would that even be? And Dr. Bruce Perry, who's a trauma expert, has this beautiful teaching. He says, in this order, regulate, relate, reason. Regulate, relate, reason. What he means is you got to work on the nervous system first. You can't reason if the nervous system's dysregulated, right? And you can't relate to anybody or yourself, authentic self, if the nervous system is dysregulated, because you're just running from a tiger. So Bruce Perry says, regulate the nervous system, then get a sense of belonging. So make sure that you're tapped into your higher power, you're tapped into the other person, you're tapped into your authentic self, you're able to come back to you. Then you can learn. But we can't learn if our nervous system is dysregulated.
It's so interesting because everything about resilient parenting is around also recognizing that oftentimes parents and caregivers will try to reason with their toddler who's having a tantrum because they can't, do X or whatever. And a lot of the conversations are around, they're not going to hear you. They're not in a place that they can do it. And so it's so interesting though, that we expect that of ourselves, that we will feel that because we're not having a tantrum, at least in the way it looks with our, 4 or 5 or 10-year-old, but you are having this deep emotional reaction and, that dysregulation, that reactivity. And yet we still expect that we're able to reason at the same time.
Yeah,
we're able, and I think,
can't.
And some of that I feel like is almost, it's our discomfort with emotions. It also feels a little like the sort of hustle culture, at least within the US, of like the emotions are the inconvenience to the end goal, which is to do more. And so you got to get through them as quickly as possible. And I think just kind of thinking about your dynamic here and this idea of motion and momentum, the momentum then is, well, we bury that. Either we bury it through an addiction pattern, a shutting down, or we ruminate on it. And then that leads to some sort of other thing. And so it is that cycle.
That's still the stress pattern in motion. So we need to bring something in that's equal or opposite force, which is the breath work. You bring in a long, deep breath, keeping that exhale as longer than the inhale. And you do that for, say, 3 minutes. Now you've come at the nervous system with something that can change the trajectory of where it is and regulate it. And now it feels safe.
And is that purely because you've slowed your breath down and you've just focused on something that is basically activates the parasympathetic nervous system?
Absolutely. Yeah. That powerful connection between a long exhale and the parasympathetic and the brain, because you can't think your way out of a dysregulated nervous system.
Right.
You have to actually, the nervous system, you've got to bring them a tool that will actually calm the nervous system. And that's the quickest one that I know. And so now the question becomes, when we have a stress pattern and shame is wrapped up in that, this thing that I'm doing in this moment, is it helping me to create a new pattern where I'm in a more conscious way?
Right.
Or am I, this thing that I'm doing in this moment, am I feeding my old pattern? And so isn't it interesting for me, that was very powerful for me to realize when I get spinning, I start spinning and in the kind of stuff that you were talking about, because I have my own version of that. I actually have agency because I feel very overwhelmed in that space. I feel, I lose my grounding. I don't even know who the hell I am anymore.
Yeah.
It's like,
Which is not an uncommon experience. I think that's the majority of people feel that feeling. Yeah.
But I've done enough breath work and I've been at this game long enough that I have that almost automatic, I have this thing I can do. And all I have to do is breathe. And I love that because I have to say, A, it's a very powerful tool. It'll change the momentum. And B, my training is in science. So my mind will just go right into analyzing freaking everything. And that's not the answer.
Right.
That's not helping at this point. So for me, I just have a regular breath practice every morning for 11 minutes. I do something as part of my morning ritual so that when I get into my day and hits the fan in my world, I've got that tool in my back pocket and I can meet whatever it is that's there with a little more equanimity.
So I have 2 questions for you in that. One, I'm curious because you said you do it for 11 minutes, which is a very specific number. So I'm curious about that. The second thing is also knowing that you are grounded in science. And we talked about this in our first episode, because there's a lot of people, if we talk about ancestral clearing, if we talk about energy, even if we talk about breath work, they're like, that's too woo-woo-y. I still feel it when I'm in a yoga class. You can tell the people that resist doing the long exhales out of their mouth. Like there's this hesitation, like, I'm going to look silly. People are going to judge me, even though everybody else is doing it in the room. Like no one's paying attention to you and whether or not you're breathing. And I'm curious if you ever struggled with that, because you're so confident in the tool, but also the idea that like, I think in our brains, it's almost like we need the idea that it couldn't be that simple because we're so stuck in the pattern that we are powerless. We can't get out of this. So then you're going to come back and tell somebody that all they have to do is breathe. There's like almost this instant defense and rejection of that.
Yeah, well, I love how the mind gets in the way. I want to bring this in. When I was in that pain management program, I walked in the room. Well, actually, I was wheeled in the room at that point because I was so weak from the detox. But the doctor said to this whole class of 20 people who were all chronic pain people coming off medication, this is what he said. What are you doing to contribute to your pain? And I was like, my hackles went up.
Yeah.
It's like, in my brain, in my mind, I'm saying to myself, I didn't say it out loud, but I said in my head, I can't believe he just said that in this room of all places, you know.
Yeah.
Right away, I was in defensive mode.
Right.
How dare you say that to this room, to us, right?
Right.
And then that noise that a record makes when the needle kind of does that thing. I had that moment. And I went, hang on a minute. Let me check that question he just asked. He said, did he say, what am I doing to contribute to my pain? And I was like, wait a minute. He's telling me that there's a possibility that I'm doing something to contribute to my pain. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, and he had my attention, boy. He had, it's like full attention. Mm-hmm. He took me from victimhood to empowerment in one question. Mm-hmm. This is what I feel is very important when we're in this kind of a space is we have agency. Yeah. And we have a tool. And yeah, it's simple. And I don't understand why we don't start learning it in pre-kindergarten because it's so basic. But we don't. And the yogis have known about this for, 5,000 years or something. And the people that work with Qigong, they know about it too. So this is well known, but it's not well known in this culture, right?
Or at least well accepted.
Yeah. And of course, so our first thing is go, no, it can't be that simple. Why? Right. Because we're taught that things are complicated, especially if it has to do with healing. We have to go, you need medical school to do that, that kind of stuff, right? So we have certain programming, certain assumptions we walk into a yoga room with. And part of the work of yoga is learning to watch the mind and not be grabbed by it and noticing what's coming in. And yes, of course, I have that all the time. So it's kind of interesting when you sit with a breath pattern or a pose or whatever you're doing in a yoga class. You sit, for me, it lasts after about from somewhere between 30 and 90 seconds, my mind starts to jump. It wants to move into the next thing. It doesn't want to stay in this breath or this mantra or this whatever the thing is. It wants to move. And so, or it has a story or whatever the thing is. And the idea is to notice that and just bring your attention back whenever you wander, because it's gonna wander, Right. And so we learn, I have a pattern, and we learn, I'm just going to come back. And we learn patience with that pattern by coming back. And we learn everybody else in the room has the same pattern. It's part of the human condition, and there's nothing to be shameful about it. And I learn, I get worried about what the person next to me is going to think. That's my ego, doing what it does. That's my own fears kind of showing up. One of the things that's kind of fun about yoga is that it actually does bring our stuff up for us to see and breathe through. And now we're reprogramming that stress pattern. That's why it's so helpful.
Yeah. And so one of the things I think about is I still have to come back to know about your 11 minutes. So we'll get on that in a second. But the other thing I think about is when you said it, this idea that we have a tendency to, I can't remember where I read it, but the idea was that we overcomplicate and oversimplify our lives. And where we overcomplicate is everything sort of outside of us, our perception of, the world, what healing can look like, all of these things. But we oversimplify in the sense of we're constantly coming back to these very distinct subjective statements. I'm a piece of shit. I am the problem. We do not build context. We do not allow for the full story when it comes to us. We're constantly oversimplifying us as a person and reducing us to this very specific element in shame, and then overcomplicating everything else and constantly creating chaos. And I think to your point of the feedback loop, I think because there's a comfort, because we've built that stress pattern where we seek that. Before you answer that, tell me the 11 minutes, because I'm going to forget about it. So tell me that, and then I want to hear what you think about our overcomplicating, oversimplifying.
I think you're talking about the neuroses. I think that's just, how the human mind does its dance, right? Now, in the Kundalini yoga tradition, because that's kind of specific to Kundalini, I've had lots of different trainings and lots of different kinds of yoga, but Kundalini yoga has this number thing they do with meditations. 3 minutes, 11 minutes, 31 minutes, 62 minutes, 2.5 hours. And there's a whole teaching around that, but it doesn't show about the science. It's just kind of what I would, as a scientist, what I would say is the lore. In terms of like science hasn't gone and done the measurements, but the yogis have noticed this from their own experience. This is the thing that's kind of fun about yoga is our job as practitioners of yoga, whether we're teachers or students, is what is our experience. I'll share it with you this way. A 3-minute meditation is enough to begin to actually settle and find some grounding. If I continue for 11 minutes, now I'm actually grounded. I wish I could explain the mechanisms that are all the things happening in the biochemistry and in the brain. But I can tell you that I'll get to about 5 minutes and then I start getting edgy and I want to get up. Now I'm working with my resistance. Now, isn't that interesting? Remember we talked about an object in motion stays in motion unless acted on by the equal or opposite force? So when we're in a meditation and we feel our resistance, that's the old program going, hey, that's the brain saying, I want to go back into my old pattern. That's the energy, that's the momentum of the old pattern, but you're actually doing a new pattern. And you have to overcome the inertia of the old pattern to build the new one. So now at the 5-minute mark, I'm like, oh, okay. I feel my resistance. Now I'm going to get up or I'm going to stay here and keep doing this. It's like, this is always the conversation. And then 7 minutes comes around and like, yeah, I hear it. I'm going to keep going. 9 minutes comes and is this over yet? So see the resistance. 11 minutes comes and somewhere in there's a threshold that I feel around the 9 to 11 minute mark, and 10 minutes isn't enough. And I can't really explain that, but I've been in this practice for 11 years and this is my experience. So time after time after time. And I'm a scientist. I'm looking at patterns. I'm trying to figure stuff out. And part of what happens in my mind when I do these practices, like, what's happening in there?
Yeah, explain it. Give me the data.
Something's happening. Yeah. What's the mechanism?
Yeah.
That's part of the mind. That's part of the dance of the mind, right? This is a really, that 11 minutes thing is a way for us to move through the threshold of the momentum of our old program and build a new one.
Oh, I think that's super interesting. And I like how you sort of broke down when and how you notice the resistance coming in, because I think that's the part where, the first pass through, I use a cold plunge at our gym, and there's a friend of mine and she and I get into the cold plunge together, and she's just incredible. Like, she just started doing this more recently, and she'll get in hands in. Like, I'm very much the person that holds my hands up in the air because there's so much pain that I feel like as soon as I get in there, and I've had to really work on like how to bring them in even for part of the time. But she was talking to me about sort of I can't remember exactly where she heard it or exactly what it was, but the idea of the first time that you want to get out, then you stay in. The second time that you want to, like, there's this, you need to experience that at least 3 times. And then your brain will stop doing that. And, I've heard some of the other data that they've talked about is like after it's like 45 seconds or something, your brain kind of is able to turn off that vigilance of like, oh my gosh, we're dying. And so it's a lot of practicing that. And it sounds very similar of learning how to kind of take that down and then to work through those very iterative processes. And when we're doing something like meditation or a cold plunge, I think sometimes we can experience it in a vacuum of like, well, this thing is hard and I'm working through it, instead of realizing, is this a similar pattern to how I function in other things too? So not just when I'm in a cold plunge and things are hard, not just when I'm meditating and I don't want to, lay there during the breathing portions and hold that pose because I just want to move my body, but more thinking about, where else am I rushing? Where else am I expecting? And I think going back full circle to some of what we've talked about, it's even showing up in those patterns of when I feel the X, I don't want to feel it. So I want to solve it right away. So I jump past the emotion to logic and reasoning, which still hasn't turned on yet. So it's, 25% functioning. I'm not actually doing anything different. I stay in the same pattern instead of going, how do I sit through X number of cycles, whatever that looks like, of these feelings until I'm able to release them. And then I can make a decision about what I can do that's going to allow me to choose and start to frame a different path moving forward.
I would say instead of release, I would say accept.
I like that.
Yeah.
Are you saying that because
that's my
because they don't go away?
Yeah, they are what they are. We're feeling beings. That's part of who we are. The question is,
right.
I'm not going to have an argument with my feelings, or I'm going to allow them to be what they are, because there's this beautiful intelligence in the body that's bringing those in. And if I can just get out of the way and let them be what they are, there's all kind of wisdom that comes in with those. And it's my argument with them that creates the suffering and the suppression and the tension and the pain.
Right. And so I think, that idea of just accepting them, or even the word that's coming to mind as you're talking right now is like the integration of them as part of the story. Yeah, so I'm
exactly.
They don't get all the attention, but they don't get no attention either. Like, what does that look like for them to be in? So
yeah. Beautiful.
I mean, so I'm thinking about this, knowing that we have, a little bit of time, but I always know that you and I could talk for like 10,000 hours and it would still feel like it's not enough. So I'm thinking about listeners who are going, okay, I'm seeing this. And probably, the thing I keep coming back to is that, when is it going to be enough? How am I contributing to these patterns? What can I do different? Just the curiosity component. So thinking about somebody that's maybe been more stuck in that feedback loop, where a lot of it has been probably where you were when you were in that room with 20 other people with chronic pain of like, the world is happening to me. I'm not in control of this. I can't do anything different about it. Everything sucks. My life sucks and it's not mine to change, to I have agency. And it's not a responsibility to make me feel more shame. It's a responsibility that can allow me to feel empowered. What's the next thing that someone can do with that? If they're recognizing this, but now they're going, okay, maybe breathwork's on the table, but like, where do I go from sort of a making sense of this and a processing of this also?
Absolutely add the breath. You just really breath practice, because you can't think straight unless you've got that in there. I can anyway. And I don't think anybody else can really. For me, it's like, it was very powerful for me to learn that everybody else had this problem. that I wasn't like, I wasn't unique. And that I wasn't having, because I got mental illness in my family. And so when something weird happens and I don't know what to do with it, I figured like, now it's my turn, now I now I'm that. Right. So I found great comfort in knowing that, this is a human condition. Right. And so there's that piece. And then the other piece I would say is bring compassion. Now I learned part of my work has been to really love myself, to love myself enough to actually do the practice, because I would feel resistance to doing the practice. And I was like, I don't even feel like I'm worth the time of doing it. And I'm like, we got to work on that. Right? So the self-love piece and the compassion and the acceptance of, this is where I am, and it's okay. And I'm going to do what I can from here. And, whatever I can do from here in this moment is enough.
I like that.
So giving ourselves space to be who we are however that's showing up is part of the next step.
Well, and I think what you're really doing is, again, and we'll say it one or two more times in case you haven't heard it. The breath work is important. So we're all leaving with the love mission to practice the breath work for ourselves and to take some deep breaths and to be with ourselves in this. But I think what you're saying in that second part is really this idea of how do I create that acceptance space, that curiosity, that openness, and coming into it knowing, how could I not have developed some of these patterns, having gone through what I've gone through, but even more at a basic level by being a human being. So coming back to that sort of universal experience, we all move through this in some way, shape, or form. And so creating that, I guess, grace within ourselves and then going, so now what is the next step I can take given the reality of where I'm at right now? And I really love your question when you thought about the paths in our brain of what am I doing to either further that or how could I shift the pattern? And I think for me going, how is that like I don't go in her room. I don't go talk to her, but I do sit and I ruminate on it for a while. And I think that attempt to try to rationalize and make sense of it or get to a place where I can feel resolve, like you said, it can't happen when I'm still in the feeling. And so learning that in that moment, the best gift I could give to myself is to be like, you have this thought and that sucks and you are in pain. And we're just going to take a little bit of time to acknowledge that you're feeling this right now.
That's exactly right.
And just breathe in the feeling. And when I go, well, but did I do the right thing? What about this? What about this? Or sometimes my brain will compare, well, at least I didn't do this. And at least I didn't do that. And it's like, none of that is helpful because we're not trying to do anything other than just allow the feeling to exist, validate that it makes sense it's here, and then breathe through it. And once I can feel that release, then I can come into what did I learn? How do I want to shift this? And maybe, and I'm assuming for me in a lot of ways, a lot of it is going to be, I'm actually okay with how things went. I'm just so conditioned to assume I'm a problem that I don't even give myself the opportunity to assess it in real time. I've already made the conclusion before the interaction happened.
Good point. Yeah, I love that. The only other thing I would add here at the end that was helpful to me was understanding that our machinery is acting as exactly as designed. So again, right? So again, and you know what? We can redesign it. We've got some agency here, right? So I'm not freaking out. There's nothing wrong with me. You know, it's actually the way I'm supposed to operate. And I have a little bit of influence on operating differently in the future. That's been super helpful for me. And I was really happy to really study trauma from a point of view of just neurophysiology, just, Stephen Porges' work and all the other neurophysiology that supports that has been, and then the yoga comes in and they already kind of knew that, but they use different language. So understanding kind of the landscape that we're working in, all of a sudden, like I have so much more compassion for myself because I'm not calling myself wrong and an aberration and all these things.
Yes. Yes. And how I think listeners, there's so much we're giving you right now. And so again, remind yourself, maybe today you take one thing. Maybe you go, okay, you've said breath 42 times. I'm taking breath. I'm going to focus on taking 3 deep breaths or 3 minutes or whatever that is. Great. Maybe the next time you come back, you can take that question of when is it going to be enough? I think the big thing that you just said is really coming back down to that sense of radical acceptance. And it's controlling what we can control and not trying to control the things we can't. And what you just said is so beautiful. We are functioning exactly as we were designed. Like our body is not doing anything wrong. Our brain is not doing anything wrong. What we're doing is saying, how can I take agency to continue to redesign and evolve it to help it continue to support me in being the version of myself I am now and I am becoming as I move forward? Because everything that we're doing is a product of what we've gone through. And so it is, I love that. And I think, for all of you listening to this, the biggest thing that I think both Elizabeth and I wanted to get to you is that shame can be a teacher. Shame gives us so much information if we are willing to, like you had to do, Elizabeth, in your love mission of shining the light on it and really thinking about what does that look like if we can go, oh, that's there. I'm going to look at that. I'm going to sit next to it for a little bit and just hold some space for it instead of going to, I have to deflect, defend, bury it. I have to logic and reason my way through it. What if you were just with it and allowed it to teach you what else might be going on so that we can dig underneath and really ask some of those hard questions? Okay, Elizabeth, before we go, is there anything we didn't get to? Any final pieces that you want to say before you remind everybody who, if you haven't listened to episode 1, you're going to go back and listen to it first, and then you're going to come back and listen to this, or you'll maybe go in reverse order. But we're going to remind everybody where they can find you. Before you do that, is there anything else that you want to say?
I always like to end with this. The greatest healer in your body, in your life, lives within you. Right? Our doctors, therapists, healer people, all those people, they can point us, they can guide us to the best possible practices, to conditions, for healing. The power is actually in here, so be careful where you're referencing. Right? Make sure to give that part of you, that intelligence that lives within you. Make sure that you get that part, because it's very powerful, and it was very healing to me and very relaxing to me, very calming to me. Oh, I have this amazing intelligence in my body that knows how to do this. Doctors can't tell the body how to do it. They can point us to the conditions, but they can't tell the body how. Right? Only the body knows. Right?
Yes. I love that. And so sort of ending with the empowerment piece. What we have is the key to being able to unlock, heal, move through whatever language you want to use, whatever is in front of us. Okay, Elizabeth, remind everybody where they can find you.
Oh, you can find me at my website, which is Elizabeth with a dash, Kipp, KIPP.com. All my social media is up. You can find me on social media too, but you can contact me through my website. There's all kinds of free resources up there. And the links will be in the show notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, if you have finished listening to this first episode and you've made it this far and you haven't listened to our first episode, go back and do that, where we talk about ancestral clearing. We talk about intergenerational trauma and transmission. It was such a beautiful conversation where we were able to kind of talk through science in a different level, to really thinking about energy from a place that doesn't feel super woo-woo-y, that it feels accessible to many of us that have rejected these types of conversations in the past. And just coming back to this idea in both of these episodes of what power do we have and how do we claim and make space for that and lean into it with a sense of love and grace and kindness. So as always, take with you what you can, come back as many times as you need to. There are resources down in the show notes, both to access Elizabeth, things that I've shared with you to take the next steps in your shame resilience journey. Otherwise, we will see you all back here next Sunday.